last week we talked a little bit about a little bit to the roll it up technique with Rick, right?
Yeah.
Is that what we were talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah.
Okay, did you get out and reflect on it a little bit?
Of course. Yeah, I tried what you said. I was doing a pretty exaggerated roll up, whereas I probably, to close the throttle, I only need to go like that. So I'm about 80% there with that.
Yeah.
That part.
Now it's interesting because the very next day I said I'm going to go out the next day and I'm going to do this, right? Well, the weather was terrible again. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys down south, you're living, nice warm weather. It was like it was about 40 degrees today and sunny. I went for a walk, but it's getting there. But I got out the following day, and what I basically realized was you only roll it up till the throttle stops. Once the throttle's closed, we don't continue. And I also felt that I still had a good portion of my palm in the general position to do it. And so I did sort of use that thumb like I thought I might, but I did have enough palm there once the throttle was closed.
You probably saw, if you did try like really forcing it, like in the pictures you show, that you're pushing on your thumb.
Yeah,
right?
So that's a very good observation. I wouldn't want people to over hyperextend. Well, not being on the bike, it does kind of show that I might be doing it too much, which you really don't think about these things when it's your program or whatever. So it's good to know.
Oh yeah, you're so into it that you're trying to roll it.
And we also try to like exaggerate movements and that kind of thing, So, but now I'm going to be more on the lookout for people having an issue like that, because
if somebody emails you, you can say, yeah, look, just
right.
It's descriptive. It's not.
Right.
I got a wrist like a gorilla now,
Yeah. So it just once that throttle's closed, that's enough.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm going past it or not. I have to take a look at those videos, but so that takes care of that.
Yeah.
And so just keep working on it. I mean, that should be, the ticket. Tonight we're taking a look at just chapters 8 through 10, questions you may have, success stories, comments, vision, lines, and cornering. We kind of take them in that, in that order. Anything in particular with the vision chapter that you had questions about? Yeah.
Okay. I got one kind of question that I'm still, when I'm coming into corners, I'm feeling a bit unsettled just from a vision point of view. Instinctively, I start looking into that corner, and that pulls me into an early apex. As soon as I start looking in, your bike starts pulling, right? So I guess my question is in pre-curve, what do you do with your eyes? Mine are really unsettled because I'm trying not to look into that curve, but I'm kind of trying to widen my vision. I'm doing all these things, and now some resources say, well, no, target fixate, but concentrate your central vision on your turn-in point. Now, you don't mention the turn-in point very much, and I'm wondering what do you do with your vision before you turn in and you move your head? You make that big dramatic move with your head right at your turn-in point. Well, what are you doing before that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I purposefully have not spent a lot of time on vision in the book because I figured I have a couple things I want to add to the mix, but generally speaking, vision is covered in many other resources. And I've received criticism a lot recently based on the lack of information in the vision chapter. But I think that what's in there is pretty important. What I have probably not included is what you're bringing up. Now, just recently, someone asked me the same question, and I made a garage drill that kind of took on this a little bit with where to look or whatnot. I forget exactly which one I just did, but
John,
yeah,
it's not a negative comment about your
right.
course, but I find nobody talks about it. Everyone talks about that. Turn your head
Yeah. So
at the turning
here's
point. So it's not
here's the
specific
answer.
to you.
Here's the answer
Yeah,
based on the question. I just got it. It could have been from you. It could have been from somebody else, but I just thought
was it
about
for me?
this.
Yeah.
So I had to put myself on the bike, and I had to think this through. And generally, if I'm going to do a U-turn in a parking lot,
Okay.
if I'm doing a switchback on Tail of the Dragon, we're going to be turning that head dramatically
Yeah.
at the right time to get to go that direction because it's such a severe turn. Now, on a sweeper or a less severe turn, that we don't want to turn the head too early, because what this one person had asked me, they said, well, what do you do on sweepers? And they said, well, I turn in too early, they said, because they're turning their head too early, right? So here's the what I reflected on. Generally, let's say if I'm going in to my left here, we're going to, let's say I'm going through a nice sweeper. We'll start with getting ready for the turn. And as we're about to tip in, right, we're going to look basically over our mirror, generally speaking. We don't need to turn a whole lot. So we turn the head, we point our nose towards that corner, but it's a sweeper, right? So we're not going to look for the exit too soon, because if we do, that could bring us inside, and it's going to make our
It will.
line will feel unstable.
Exactly.
So what happens is, so this is, and I reflected on this a little bit more while riding last week and in past couple weeks, was start the sweeper looking over your mirror. Now, as you turn, the motorcycle will start to turn. Your body stays in the same position, but as the motorcycle moves through the turn, your eyes are now showing you more section of the turn till you see the exit. So once we get into the position over the mirror for the sweeper, we can let the motorcycle do its thing as we kind of track towards that exit till once we see it. That's the general idea.
You ratchet your eyes along as you go.
Right.
You follow that.
You could ratchet the eyes, which would be more of a scan type thing where we're focusing, refocusing, or we can just kind of sweep them, what I would call it, the tracking motion of sweeping. Either way, but then we're finally going to see that exit and go. Tim, you had something to say?
I did, John. Thanks. And this is for me and me only. We're all individuals, right? The further I can look ahead, the less I make the early turns or the early corrections, if you will. So the further out I can see on a sweeper, the better off I'm going to be. I'll make that turn a little more gradual, if you will. Now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's a really tight turn, I come on it quick, I look fast. But if I can see further ahead, just kind of like driving a car, actually, when I was teaching my son, if I can see farther ahead, I have less, how can I put this? I have less instinct to turn in early.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, you're connecting the dots a certain way, whereas someone else, it might be more difficult. You're able to stay on your line. You like what's happening. So you're looking further ahead, let's say, than I might be advising or someone else might like to do, but it works for you to stay on your line. So you've kind of programmed yourself to do that. If someone's having trouble looking too far ahead, they could have early turn-in problems, and they may not have to look that far ahead to sort of correct that change. One of the things I remember when I was teaching the BRC and in my training as an MSF coach and learning about the cornering process, just your straight standard cornering process, oftentimes people do ask, how far should I look ahead in the turn? And they think that they have to look super, super, super duper far ahead in the turn. Let me give an example. There's I don't know if you're familiar with the basic rider course, but there's one exercise where you basically do, it's cornering judgment. And so you go you go down in a line one at a time, you go through a close gate, and then you go through a far gate. And I remember when I was learning how to teach that exercise, students would want to turn because they're doing a 180, wider and a narrower one. Okay, and the people would say, how far do I turn the head? And we were sort of coached to coach them. You don't have to swing that head around at the entry. Let it go. It'll come to you. Now, in practice, when I'm in really, like I said, really tight twisties, I will turn my head more on like a switchback or something like that, because I really want to get that bike turned. But vision is a very difficult thing to describe, to coach people on. That's why I like the nose pointing. I think that directs you to at least get in the ballpark of where you want to go.
And the nose will allow you, even if you wear glasses. I'm sorry, let me interrupt, John.
Go ahead. Yeah,
if you wear glasses like Rick and I do, it will allow you to kind of do that. You won't overcorrect if you look through your glasses. If you try to look off to the side of the glasses,
there you go.
I'm in trouble.
That's a good tip. And so I'll say this: your direction is determined very much so by where you're looking. So if you're finding when you're going in the turns that you're going too wide, maybe you want to bring the gaze in a little bit. If you find that you're turning in too early, or you're not happy with your line, maybe you want to point the gaze a little bit more outward. But my idea is generally I'm pointing my nose in that direction, and there, people say, look where you want to go. Well, I can look, see right now my nose is pointing straight, but I'm looking off to the side, right? So that's why I always liked, people say point your chin in that direction, look, but there's many different ways to do it. But the idea is the motorcycle will follow where we look. And I actually, in this poor review that I got recently, positive target fixation, I'm going to be writing about this in my newsletter coming up, because I just want to, set the record straight, that kind of thing, a little drama, at Street Skills. But one of the things I got a little beat up for was this concept of positive target fixation. The idea that we can choose our target. We can choose where we want to direct the motorcycle.
Yes.
And I like that. I like the spin on that. And I learned it from Nick Einach's book, Sport Riding Techniques, right on page 27. So he says something like, you just got to pick the right targets. And so I've built off of that as positive target fixation. I'm sure I'm not the first person to ever talk about it like that. So just remember, whenever we look at something for a longer period of time, we tend to go in that direction, which when we talk about vision, one of the things that a lot of people, especially when I was learning how to ride, in many of the years, I thought I was an experienced motorcyclist. As I'm going through a curve, I would be fearful that if I moved my eyes to check the peripheral area, that it would ruin my line. So I had to build in to my vision chapter that we can sweep and scan the sides of the road, because if you can keep the nose pointed, you're going to be tracking in that direction, but you can sweep and scan that peripheral vision to pick up those things. Tim, you ever see something on the side of the road?
Yeah, absolutely. I have. And, looking at that guardrail, obviously you want to see it and then get away from it, at least for me.
Yeah.
But another thing I want to point out, John, is what you have is so real that there comes time when you have to have faith. I don't care if it's motorcycle riding, if it's sporting clays, whatever, you have to have faith. Okay. If you allow your brain, or if I allow my brain to decide that this is not safe, it isn't safe.
Right.
My brain says, look at the guardrail, but I know from this class and others, look where I want to go.
Yeah. One of the things I'm going to tell you that sort of brings things a little bit, I guess I wasn't planning on saying it like this, but the guardrail That's what, let me just backtrack a little bit. The method or the formula of cornering confidence makes it so that the guardrail is less of a threat because you're controlling your speed with the trail braking and all that stuff that I teach in the book. If you're going through, and we'll talk about the cornering a little bit later, but if you're playing the guessing game, okay, if we're playing the guessing game where we don't know if we judged our speed correctly. We might have, but hell, I had to make that decision back there because now I'm off the brakes and I'm starting to gain speed again. I better not have to, worry about that guardrail because there's nothing I can do about it now. And so now we have the anxiety built in there. But if the program's followed and people get the brake throttle transitions like we were talking about as we entered today's Zoom, that guardrail is going to be there, but it's not going to be as scary because think about this. You're going down the road, you're taking a twisty turn, it's a sweeper, whatever it is. You're in the curves. We only have a 10-foot wide lane, right? So what we're trying to do with cornering confidence is stay within that 10 feet anyways, or however wide the road is. That's where you're going to get that confidence and not worry so much about those things that are off on the sides of the road because you're able to put that motorcycle in that lane. And we talk about lane lines in this particular Zoom too. Line is very important as well. So vision is a very important thing, but beyond look, point that nose and sweep and scan, and to play the what if game, and look for those things that are out there, I would assume that people kind of have vision covered. Yeah, go ahead, Rick. Hang on, I unmute you. Go ahead, Rick. Hang on. Can't hear you.
I'll be muted.
Okay, you're okay.
You got
I got you, Rick. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I'm running about 40% confidence on my vision. I'm but just going back, I'm getting all this about maybe pull back my severe turn. Okay, I'm getting all that, but where do you find you're looking pre-curve before you do that turn?
When I am going in a straight line, right?
Yeah.
I am looking straight. If my motorcycle is upright, I am looking straight. Now I'm going to enter the turn. So right before I initiate the turn, I'll turn it. I'm usually getting into pre-position mode before, and then I'll tip in and look. See so I'll repeat that. So we're talking in the cornering chapter about pre-positioning the body. Pre-positioning the body could be just a slight, it could be a slight shoulder, kissing the mirror, or it could be just being in line with the motorcycle, right? But I'm ready for this turn. As I'm about to initiate the turn with counter steering, I'll look in the direction I want to go. I don't want to look before that, really. I can't see because I'm not in the turn yet unless it's a very good sight distance.
And that's where I traditionally get pulled in. I start looking early, I pull in, and that's what I'm trying to get. Are you focusing on are you just big picture looking straight ahead, or are you looking at your turning point?
What I would say is try not to rush things.
Yeah.
Because the corner's going to come soon enough. So the timing is we look at the cornering chapter, it's slow, look, press, roll.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we're coming in, we're going to slow, look right before we press. It's my mentor for the MSF coaching told me it's really not 4 steps, slow, look, press, and roll. As the book will say, right? It's really 2. It's slow, look, press, roll is the basic cornering technique. So we're going to slow, look, press, and roll at the same time. That's normally going to happen because we're going slow. Okay, we over slow for that turn, so we have to roll on the throttle to keep steady through it as a newbie in the MSF class. Now with the method here, we just kind of flip the 2 steps, slow look, press, then roll. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Okay. Something to work on. Yeah.
Something to work on. Just first of all, you're winning now anyways, because you're thinking about your vision, right? So right, that in of itself is a win, because you can connect things you're doing and experimenting with when you're on the bike with what the bike actually does. So if you're looking too much, if you're looking too little, you're gonna get a sense of where your direction is heading. But I don't know. I try to look at vision as something that is pretty basic, but I don't know. I was at the Champions Riding School, and Nick Einach, he asked the people, well, what do you want to work on? You're a professional rider, to his coaches, and they say, well, vision. So, even the best riders in the world say they have to work more on vision. I think that people have a pretty good grasp of it generally, with a few tweaks. Yeah, Tim.
So looking on page 47, John, I think you have a great example here, which basically says, fixate here, but you also have the scan and sweep. So, and again, it will be individual for all of us. But again, 47 might really help. At least it helps me.
Yeah.
It helped me a lot, because I didn't want to look completely to the right on the top picture, or even the middle, even the bottom.
Right.
Because I needed some of my collective vision, I guess we'll call it, to be processing what's happening. But you know what? Let's just call it 75% for my term. That works for me. When I'm riding, whether it's 181 or whatever, I'm trying to do that 75% thing in the direction of the turn. Just a thought.
Yeah. No, So vision is one of those things, like anything, it's very hard to explain. So I tried to take driving instruction talks a lot about getting the big picture, right? So I'm a driver ed teacher, part of my training, right? And so when we talk about the big picture, that's something that you often hear with the experts in motorcycling talk about as well. They say things like, I've heard a lot of experienced rider coaches that are talking to experienced riders. I'm saying, they'll say, okay, let's Keith Code's one of them. As you're riding along and you're looking straight ahead, try to see what you can process on the peripheral vision, right? So if I'm going down the road and I'm looking straight ahead, I could see maybe the movement of a car in a driveway that I may not have picked up. And what the point is, try to be more aware of the things outside of that little central vision cone. And Francisco, that could be really good for you, especially to work on with vision outside of the cornering confidence. I do talk about paying attention to that peripheral vision a little bit in here, but trying to take in the big picture, because when you're in traffic in Florida, there could be a lot going on. And so if we're just focused on the license plate of the car in front of us and what's ahead of them, and we're not consciously making an effort to see what's in that peripheral vision, we might miss a threat. This comes out of my traffic course that kind of is on the back burner. It's something that I had talked about there as well. But I think we did enough on vision, don't you think?
Yep.
I guess if you have any more questions about that, we can always come back to it, because we're going to be doing Zooms in the future. And if you have specific questions, you can email me, or I can, give you another call through Zoom or whatnot. Let's move on to lines. All right. It's interesting. The sharp criticism I received also had to do with the line information that I'm teaching, and that I'm trying to think what the exact wording was. I don't really believe in a proper line, or that there's a correct line or something, which is, I believe there is a correct line. I call it the ideal world, or your planned line. Okay. And so we'll start with that. Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Oh, I just want to say on that, I don't know if that criticism is justified because every corner's going to have a line for it. You can't, I know what they're talking about. They're saying, well, delayed apex, which is outside inside, is the right line. And that line works pretty well for right-handers, but for left-handers where you might have a lot of traffic, you're going to be going outside, outside. I think that's undue criticism because you got to practice all your lines because every corner is going to have a different surprise for you.
And
Right?
that's
So
I got to agree with
exactly,
Rick.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I got to agree with Rick. Again, we're all individuals. What's comfortable with me may not be for Rick or you or, or Francisco or anything else. By the way, Francisco, love the hair, man. Wish I had it.
Yeah, me too. You know?
I'm with you, brother. But honestly, we're all
Pretty long.
individuals. And until you get out and practice and you get what I call the feel, until you get that part of you don't know, but don't follow, that bump or the guy in front of you.
One of the things that a lot of people have, that I've heard, is several people have criticized or whatever, just in general, or they've advocated for the delayed apex, which is a good technique. Okay, fine, I get it. One of the things that I thought was missing in the literature in other training programs was the real world adaptation type of line. Okay, what to do if the plan falls apart. Yes, we want to have a planned line, but we also have to understand the real world may not, the real world might take into place. Like this particular image here is one of my favorites in the book because it just shows us how our line could change based on a car coming against our direction. And if you're planning to do that outside line and your speed is at that the point where you're going to make that slighter or wider arc, you could be into trouble there, right? So we're trying to set people up in this chapter for the permission, if you will, the encouragement to change your line. I mean, I read now Total Control in Lee Parks is, he's a hero of mine. But I remember the first time I read Total Control, he talked about 50 pensing or whatever it was. You don't want to go through a turn in parts. Now there's a double apex turn. Sometimes we go through a curve. It's a double apex where you're going to do like a pie shape through it. There's not going to be one apex because it's a kind of a big sweeper or whatnot. But when I read that, how I kind of took that was, geez, if I change my line in a turn, I'm not probably very good because I didn't plan correctly or this and that. But once I realized you can't plan your line perfectly if you don't have all the knowledge of the curve and what might be in it and where it ends up. Now, if you're on a track, you have that luxury where you know exactly what's ahead. And I found that I could have confidence by changing my line. Now, I did take the ARC, the Advanced Rider Course, MSF. It's a nice class. If you have it near you, you should try it. All right. Now, in that class, they did work with Nick Einach to design the curriculum, and they packed a lot of stuff in there. But they do have you riding in circles, changing your line, and using your brakes a little bit, which is it's a very effective set of exercises. That being said, it's buried in so much other content that it might be just kind of another thing that you were exposed to that day. And so people might not get as much out of that as they could. But I wanted to make it a centerpiece of my line chapter. Not only should you change your line, but how to do it in the corner. Yeah, Francisco.
Right. So, but putting that aside, which I mean, I understand is the message that you want to convey, that you can change your line, or that you need to change your line, when it's required. Do you have a preferred line? I mean, you have the typical outside, inside thing.
Yeah. So, okay. So in the book, we're going to, the curriculum I basically have says, listen, we want to choose a line that's going to give us the best traction, vision, and space cushion, right? Now I drew like a little picture here. So whatever, if we're coming into this, let's say we're gonna take the wider turn here, we want to take a line that we can sort of see what's ahead, right? Let's just say this is a series of off ramps or whatever. We can use the whole thing. So we want to be maybe over here because we're going to get, we're going to have good traction. Let's say it's all dry. It's all the same right now. We want to be over probably to the outside, and we go to where we can see and then take it to the outside again. But, what if there's gravel here or an object here? Okay, that wouldn't, let's say there's an oil slick or something. We don't like the color of the surface, a pothole. That wouldn't give us the best traction, right? So we're going to have to now start to give up maybe some vision of the turn to see, because we got to change that line. So that would be the preferred line. Now, I typically, when I'm trying to think exactly what my preferred line is, I do start on the outside if I'm planning it. I talk about zone targeting. That's how I simplify it. I say, okay, instead of the left, middle, right, let's just do outside, inside, and try to just hit those areas or zones, whether we want to come inside or outside so much. But generally speaking, I'll want that nice sweeping arc. I want something that'll keep the motorcycle vertically straighter, less risk. Why people say they like the hang on a second, the delayed apex is you're at lean for less time. So if I come in and I delay my apex, I'll lean more steeply, but then I'll be out of it. So we're spending less time at lean. That's one of the perks of the late apex. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, just curious, and I'd really like to get your opinion on this. For an inside turn, let's say it's an inside left. I shoot more for about 50% or the center of the lane, because if you get up on the yelp line, obviously you could be leaning over into another lane, depending on the twisty there. But if I'm doing outside, I kind of like 75% because I'm leaning towards away from the traffic, if you will. What are your thoughts?
Well, when I first started teaching the BRC, the line was outside, inside, outside, outside, inside, outside.
Right.
The new update, which I got updated and then I sort of didn't teach it much. I just started my own thing. I think the new BRC teaches a middle, middle, middle. I know other it might not be middle, middle, middle for the BRC, which don't quote me on that. I think though that they did sort of say just what you're saying. Let's take it a little slower and stay to the middle versus these extremes of the lane. And I think one of the professional books that I read, I'm trying to think which one it was. It could be Smooth Riding by Pridmore, but I'm not quite sure. He also might advocate that middle, middle, middle. Could be Leon or Nick Einach too, but it was in one of those other books. So yeah, there are some people that say what you're saying. Why push the extreme of the lane? Try to give yourself cushion. Rick, you have a question? No, you good? So if we take a look at this picture here, I wanted to point out something with the two different, you could see the different radius, the radii, if you will, or how sharp turns are. When you talk about, do I have a pre-line? Well, the most predominant feature for your line is going to be your entry speed, right? So your pre-corner speed. And, basically in the book, what I'll say a lot is that the higher the speed, the slighter your arc must be. Now, I say slighter because there's many different ways why I chose slighter over wider, okay? But slighter to me is a wide arc. For example, if I take this one, I think we might have talked about this last week a little bit. If I'm going, let's just for the sake of argument, put 55 miles an hour on this turn, I can't take the sharper turn at 55, right? So I may want to take it at, this might be, 35.
Are we on page 52, John?
Let's see here. No, this one here would have more to do with 49.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
so think about this. I can take this line at 35, can I? The wider line, the slighter turn, right? I can do this one at 35 or 55, let's say. But I can only take the sharper turn at a slower speed. It's a slower turn, right?
Right.
And that is a very important thing with line selection. Okay, you cannot. Your speed is going to predetermine your line to a certain extent, and that's why people run wide and hit things or go off the road, because they might be going too fast. Now, can you go too slow?
Maybe.
You could. Okay,
Yeah.
you could go too slow. If someone were to slow so much that they caught the edge here of the shoulder, it could take them down, right?
Yes.
So that is, I guess, when we're thinking about picking a line, just remember our pre-corner speed has the most influence over that resulting line, right? Now, basically, on the next couple pages in the chapter or whatever, I just kind of talk about the beginning and end, pre and post. Generally speaking, you want to make it as straight as possible. You want to keep the motorcycle as upright as possible. I don't have to talk too much about the book here, but there's different things with different lines. You can take a look at those things and ask me questions if you have any questions about anything on those pages. But the whole idea with lines for me is we want to plan a line that gives us the best traction, vision, and margin of error. But then as we proceed towards the turn, there could be something that alters that plan from beginning to end. And we want to be able to adjust for that change in plan by changing the line. Now, when we get to, so I guess what I could, before I go to a question or two on lines, I do have, I only got about maybe 15 minutes though, unfortunately left tonight, but just to get us to the point where we can kind of move on past lines. If you do go to page 52 or whatnot, one of the things that I just want to leave with you guys is this one here. Any line is appropriate if it's matched to speed. So I can go inside to inside, no problem, if I'm going slower, right? That's very important, because sometimes we're going to be forced inside. Like, take a look at this turn right here that I'm showing you, this image. We were on Route 16 in Virginia, and one of my friends was making a right-hander, okay, uphill, a tight switchback uphill, and a tractor trailer was coming the other way. This is right, I think, north or whatever of Hungry Mother State Park there. And as an 18-wheeler goes around a switchback, what happens is it closes up.
Yeah.
It cuts you off. It eats up your lane. So that would be a perfect example here of when you might be forced to enter on the inside.
Yeah, time to French kiss the mirror then, huh?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Or yeah, I mean, he probably did put his lips on the thing. He actually got forced off the road, believe it or not, at low speed, and he turned out to be okay, but quite shaken up, right? Because right. I mean, that truck was coming quickly into his lane with that right about head height, But so I like to talk about that, and also the oscillations. Okay, the oscillations are one of my happiest parts of the whole course, because these are fun. These are light swerves in lean, page 53, if you're following along in the book. The oscillation is basically just, you know, a light swerve without changing your body position, just moving those handlebars so you can just kind of do a little bit of an oscillation. And they're fun, but they're also very productive for changing your lane position while in a curve. Now, naturally, you can see the progression that I show there. We don't want to start doing these in really tight turns, really sharp turns, right? We want to practice what they do. Almost even a slight bend on a straight, you know, straight road, you could actually kind of practice what an oscillation is. You don't have to be in full kiss the mirror to practice what oscillations are. It's just simply altering your line. Why I like this so much is you build muscle memory for when you need to change your lane, which we talk about in a later chapter. One other thing, I guess the last part about this, have you guys ever gone into a turn and you're on the throttle and you're going a little too fast, so you roll off the throttle?
Oh yeah, are you turning tighter?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let me ask you this though. If you were to be sitting around the coffee shop telling people, oh yeah, I just rolled off the throttle in the turn, you think you might get chastised, or people might say, well, that's not proper?
I don't care. It works.
I would believe you might, okay? People will say, nope, as soon as you hit that turn, you got to roll on throughout the turn, right? When you have closed the throttle, we don't want, if we chop it, that could be, we don't want to be abrupt, right? But if we close that throttle, that's going to have the effect of slowing our speed and helping us bring that bike around. So that is
shortening the wheelbase.
Yeah, it weights the front tire, compressing the fork springs. It gives us a little better geometry for the turn, but it's the slower speed. And that's one of the things when I talked to Nick Einach about sort of the way that the telelever system works on the GSs is a little different, right? It actually works opposite with geometry when you're braking and accelerating. It's one of those weird animals. And we want the geometry of the wheelbase, okay, as I talk about in the book. All those things will help us turn the motorcycle. But what he told me was the speed is the most important component. The speed is what is going to help you make that turn. Controlling that speed with your brakes or slowing power is going to help you make the turn 90% or so, let's say, and the geometry would help contribute, but that wouldn't be your saving grace. For example, if I were to hit, let's say I'm coming in and I hit those brakes really hard, I'll get better turning geometry, right? But I may not get the proper braking if I went too hard last minute or something like that. So controlling your speed is probably going to help us the most. And, you know, just sometimes rolling off that throttle can really help. And so this particular chapter on lines, the idea is I want people to practice with the throttle and the coasting. I want people to practice
Quick question on that.
Oscillations and changing their line. Yeah.
When you talk about coasting, right? I mean, a lot of people talk about coasting by saying that coasting is when you pull the clutch lever in. Is that what you refer to by coasting?
Okay. So I chose the word coasting. Oftentimes people get that impression, okay, that coasting is like neutral or
right.
with the clutch pulled in.
Right.
I try to specify clearly that's not what I'm saying. And here's where why I stuck with coasting. Keith Code talks about it in Twist of the Wrist. He calls it a coasting period, which means even if we want to go directly from brakes to throttle, there's going to be a coasting period. We're not going to, even if we did it immediately, there's still even a short little coasting period when we're not really using both, or we're not using either, right? And he talks about a coasting period. And then I researched car driving instruction, not like teenagers, but getting around a track. They also referred to coasting as just engine braking,
Braking.
okay, in a gear, throttle closed. And so I will use the word coast to mean that you're, and I get this question often. When I say coasting, I mean the clutch is released, the throttle is closed, we are in gear.
Deceleration.
And that's slowing us down. Yeah, it's very similar to rear brake effect, but we're not giving it any power, and so we're getting rolling resistance, not only from the tires but the motor, resistance of inside the combustion chambers, whatever happens with that. I'm not an engineer, but that slows us as well. Okay. But there's limits to coasting, which we talk about in the next one. Go ahead, Francisco.
I was just going to say, did you ever downshift on a curve?
I talk about, yes, I have. There's going to be some times when you misjudge what gear to be in. Okay. So you'll say to yourself, geez, I had to stay on the brakes. I had to slow a little bit longer than this gear will allow for when I go to give it throttle. Right. So you're going to get into that position at some point. Now you have a couple of choices. If you're in too high a gear, you can leave the gear alone and roll on, and it may not be very responsive, but eventually it will pick up and you will be fine. Okay. But there could be too large a gap sometimes between your engine speed and your road speed that may not work. And in those rare instances, yes, downshifting is something that you may have to do leaned over. That's why in the smoothness chapter, we talk about doing it very smoothly. And if you do downshift and release that clutch ever so slightly, then it's not going to demand braking traction from the rear tire is quickly. See what I'm saying? So like, let's say I'm leaned over and I go into a low gear and I just release the clutch quickly. It's like using the rear brake. So remember, I only have part of my traction pie I'm giving a lot of that traction pie to the turn now. And if I request braking traction too quickly, I could overwhelm the traction. Mm-hmm. But Francisco, it's very satisfying when everything comes together and you're in a turn, you realize you got a downshift because you have muscle memory of that smooth downshift. You deliver that gear nice and smoothly to the gear below, and it hooks up, and you don't overwhelm that traction because you're used to keeping that chassis in a flatter position and all that stuff. And so upshifting 100% you can feel comfortable doing in a turn. You'll usually, I'm not going to say never, but you'll typically have zero issue having to upshift in a turn. That will not use, because you'll be already on the rear tire at that point trying to accelerate. Yeah.
John, you got a great point. I think somewhere in the book, I can't pull it at the moment, but when you talk about, it's better to go in too high a gear than too low a gear. So that's one thing definitely you can do. And the second thing, for me at least, I went in before and I've had too low a gear, and either it's too hard of braking or maybe you can start chirping. That's when I start trying to finesse the clutch.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Okay. One of the things I thought about was when Francisco said, well, what if you're in too high a gear? I thought of, well, you could, if it's not catching, you could pull in the clutch a little bit and rev it higher to try to match, to get things going and try to use that clutch in the turn. Typically I have my hands full in the turn. So feathering the clutch isn't something I will usually do, but that could be effective for controlling delivery of power to the rear wheel. Usually I slip the clutch when I'm in lower speed maneuvers. However, it can be done. Like, let's say you're in too low a gear. You could, I guess, theoretically pull in the clutch a little bit to take some of the abruptness away.
Okay.
But what I will usually do is if I'm in too low a gear, I usually tough it out. If I'm in too high a gear, I usually tough it out. But most of the time, we usually get the gearing right on. But if I have a choice, I usually choose to go a gear up rather than a gear down. Because I know if I go down, I have to release that clutch. And now I don't know what's going to happen, if I guessed wrong and went too low. See? So I hedge my bet and I'll go up versus the low. But sometimes I'm too low a gear and I just have to rev it. I just let it until I exit and whatever. But it's really nice when everything comes together, though. But it's one final point, Francisco, I'll say about this. None of us, not even the best motorcyclists in the world that have been doing it since they were 3 years old, always gets the right gear chosen. Okay? Every rider makes a mistake for all the things we've talked about tonight. They'll look in the wrong place. They'll apply too much brake pressure. They'll pick the wrong line. This is expected if you ride, a fair amount of time. Don't expect every gear shift, every corner to be perfect because we're trying to. So if we have a bell curve here, or just, we're in the middle when we're happy with everything, while occasionally we're going to be feeling really good or feeling really bad about our performance. That's just the way everything works. And so, the line thing, I would just say try to, pick smart lines as we talk about in the book, but generally be prepared to make adjustments because there's no way you're going to go out for a Saturday or Sunday ride for 3 hours or all day with your friends and every single curve that you go through is going to just be perfect like you planned. As a matter of fact, I should do a little study here, a little test. I should go out with my buddies next time. I should put one of those golf counters on my, on my handlebars somewhere, and then not in the turn, but after I make a turn, if it was a turn that, didn't work, I should click it or whatever. Right now, actually, my friend, he knows how to count all the turns we go through on certain trips. Believe it or not. He found out the tail of the Dragon doesn't really have 318 curves or something like that. He goes, what we would call a turn is really like a sweeper. They call it 3 turns or something. I don't know. But I probably won't do that because it would require too much concentration to do that versus riding. But I can guarantee you it's something like if I had 10 or 15% of my turns unpredictable, I would say that would probably be a low estimate. I would say somewhere between, maybe 1 out of 5 would probably be a little high for completely unpredictable. Okay, let's say it's 5%. Let's say 5 out of 100 turns are complete disasters. Something that screws up your plan. So that's what I want people to experience. That's where I think the confidence comes in. If you have trouble, my goal for people is that they can get themselves out of trouble with the techniques that we talk about and the method, and that's going to yield the confidence. That's the general idea. Now, what's interesting is I have a meeting at 8:00. I'm going to be interviewed on a podcast. You ever hear "So You Think You Want to Ride a Motorcycle"? Gentleman in the New York City, he put together a podcast, and it's a pretty good podcast. And I'm going to be talking to him at 8:00, and we're just doing a little interview and that kind of thing. So I don't have any more time to spend tonight, but it's good because we're at an hour anyways. I didn't get to cornering. So maybe we'll cram that in next week. The last one And these are going quite nicely. I like having them. So, I mean, I don't know if I'll do them weekly. I might take a little break there, but I might do a few on Saturdays. People are saying they might like a Saturday. Some people across the pond in UK and stuff like that. So maybe we'll do a Saturday or whatever. Maybe less is more. I see that the numbers are kind of dwindling as time goes on, but next time, maybe it'll even work out better that we talk about cornering and trail breaking together. And usually cornering hazards is something I say, well, now you just use all these techniques when the chips are down. And we apply the thing. It's one of those things. Oh, gee, I'm already, factoring in how I'm going to handle the hazards because of all the stuff before. Oh, you took the mask off, and I already know how to handle them. So that's sort of the whole chapter there. Yeah, Tim.
So, John, please keep up the YouTube also, okay? Really like it, man.
Good. Yeah. Okay. Great. So, I was thinking I haven't done a garage drill in a week or so. This has been kind of an interesting week for me. Been a little busy with some other things. I got this BMW I picked up last week, and so I had actually, because they closed the DMVs, I drove to Cortland, New York, about 2 hours from my house. The only DMV I could bring the actual paperwork to get the bike on the road. It was the only place in the whole state.
Wow.
So I drove down, and so I've been kind of monkeying around with that, working on a bike a little bit. So, so that's kind of been taking up a little bit of my time. I'm also going to be doing, I got a couple really good ideas, a little different than the skills YouTube videos. I want to do trailering a motorcycle, how to strap your motorcycle down, because there's about 100 videos for this, but I usually watch them and I say, well, there's something they're missing, So I'm also going to show my camping rig in my minivan. Because someone was Fast Eddie, this Moto Jitsu, he was talking about getting a camper so he could travel around. And, I said to him, well, I just convert my Grand Caravan into something I can go across country. And so I'm going to think about doing some other things. I have a hitch carrier. So I don't know. I have the time now, so I may do things like that. But thank you. And YouTube is, I'm close to, I think I have something like 2,700 subscribers. And so if I get to 3,000, I'll be pretty happy. But again, it's not like I lay awake at night thinking to myself, geez, how am I going to get more subscribers, on YouTube.
Well, you are making a difference, though. You're making a difference.
I love this group, and I really appreciate you guys, give me positive comments. My newsletter that's coming out later this week, I'm going to be, talking about a few, negative type reviews. And, I thought about, I don't want to be sour grapes and be defensive in this, but it's out there, and I want to sort of address certain things, and I'll try to do it in a very classy way. But I do understand. One of the things I'll end with here is I do understand not everybody's going to like what I'm teaching or saying. And that's how the book came to be. I said things, they were not right. It was misunderstandings. It didn't work. It was a myth. It was this, it was that. Through all the years, I've learned how to be a coach. People have been saying that's not true. You really mean this. And
perception.
It's so difficult to take constructive criticism, but I will tell you this. Without it, if I would have rejected it, this book would have never have been, it wouldn't have been as good as I think it turned out, because I would have had a lot of errors in it and things that didn't make sense. So I've appreciated every comment, be it negative or positive, because it gets me to think. It either justifies what I'm saying if I research it, or I change my mind. Everybody wins.